Good afternoon. Hello. I'm hoping that we're live. Yes, I think it says live on the left. So, welcome along to today's Women in Learning Leadership webinar in partnership with the Learning and Performance Institute. It's my absolute pleasure to have been asked to host this today, and we are looking at a learning leader's journey. And I suppose we're doing that through the lens of the Women in Learning Leadership initiative. So, we are joined by four amazing women today. So I'm going to introduce them all quickly, and then we will get into a discussion about their careers, lessons learned, tips, etc. So lots and lots of really good value for you all to take away. Do drop us any questions or thoughts or reflections into the comments section so we can see those come through. We can pull through any questions, etc., towards the end. So hopefully it will be a nice discussion. And I would highly recommend that you track them all down on LinkedIn as well, and be able to connect with them afterwards if you've got any additional questions or there's anything that we don't get covered today. So that's enough from me. So we'll go straight into the introductions. So Prachi Prasad has been in and around learning and development, and I phrased it as business strategy, Prachi. I hope that's okay. For over 20 years. And as we'll hear, she didn't necessarily start in L&D straight away. So really interesting transition through her career working with brands including NIIT, IBM and Vodafone. And she now heads up leadership and learning globally for dunnhumby. So Dr. Serena Gonçalves Fersh has been also in and around learning for around 20 years, with a very rich and varied career that includes brands like IBM, KPMG, Spencer Stuart, and she's now heading up talent for Software One. And she is also, I have to mention this, she's also the current holder of the Colin Steed Award, recognised by the LPI for, Lifetime Achievement Award, Serena, just being all round wonderful. So yeah, so I'll embarrass her, but she's the current holder of that award as well. So that's very, very special. And Jackie Bearfield also has a wealth of experience in an illustrious career with organisations including Unilever, Barclays, and she now heads up learning and capability development for Philip Morris International. And last but by no means least, the LPI's very own Sarah Hatton, so Chief Learning Officer. So leading on learning for the learning community. So that's very meta. And she's very well placed to do this, having had a career that spanned organisations such as Tesla, Camelot and Gusto. So you can see we've got amazing experience in the room here. And I just would like to throw it to you. I mean, Prachi, if I can start with you, but sort of, very quick sort of summary overview of sort of where you start. We'll go into early careers in just a second, but sort of how you've got to where you are today.
Thank you, Kate. I think it's fair to say I've had a very squiggly career. This is not what I thought I would be. So I studied engineering, electrical engineering, and worked with Siemens for a good 4 to 5 years installing switchgears in rural India. I would not recommend that to anyone. But anyway, I think that's where my journey ended as far as engineering was concerned. And since then, it's been a bit of marketing, kind of a lot of years of consulting. And most of the consulting was with IBM around talent and change, so very closely associated with learning. And then at some point, kind of change in career to being part of HR and learning and development. So that's been a shift, not by design, but I am very glad to be where I am. I've always been passionate about people, so that's been the underlying theme.
I love that. I love the squiggly careers term as well. And there's a great podcast. If those of you watching who haven't come across that, it's my best friend's sister-in-law that is one of the girls on that, but it's excellent. I don't say that from bias because I would say I've had a squiggly route through as well. And Serena, what about you?
So mine's a little bit more linear, but I have done absolutely everything there is to do in L&D. So my master's was in HR. I just spent a year as a generalist, and since then it's L&D. Everything from starting with coordination, instructional design, facilitation. Prachi and I were in IBM together, where I was a learning solutions consultant. And then again, more client facing stuff with KPMG, and gone on to lead functions and regions and global learning. I think the only slight deviation was my midlife crisis when I decided to get a doctorate, but that was also in learning. I would not recommend that as a midlife crisis. But I love our profession and our field. I love the idea that now I'm at a place where I can give back to it. And it's the only career I know, though some might say that means I know little else.
There's nothing wrong with that. And I love the fact that you've got that first-hand experience of all of those different roles, and therefore probably that empathy with different members of your team or different suppliers who are trying to do things as well for you. And Jackie, what about you? There's a strong thread throughout your career.
Yeah, I just listening to Prachi and Serena there. I think I was going to say that I also had a squiggly career, but it's not been quite as squiggly as yours, Prachi, in terms of the very different roles that you've had. So there's a strong thread, in mine in L&D, but I've kind of come up through the ranks, and I've made full use of the fact that the skills in L&D are so transferable. So I started, once I kind of made my mind up that that's the route that I wanted to take. I wanted to be kind of corporate training. Actually, IT training was my first moment of enlightenment. So I spent 3 years as an individual contributor. And then I was lucky enough to be offered a role in a leadership position, well, a sort of a management position. And that kind of set me off on that trajectory then. So from then I've probably worked for 9 major different organizations. I've worked in, I don't know how many industries and sectors. So in terms of that, that's how I see it as being squiggly, is because I've moved from role to role. And rather than go through all of those different roles that I've had, because there have been many, I had a thought on this, which is that the takeaway for me, or the standout point for me, is that I've never been afraid to take a step back to move forward. And just thinking about the conversation we're having today, it's something that has worked well for me. I've kind of identified an organization that I really want to work for, and then not been hung up on the title or the salary or the next step in my career, and then gone in that role, proved myself, and then made it to the role. As soon as it presented itself, I was then obviously in a great position to go after that. So yeah, I just thought it'd be more of an interesting point to raise, rather than go through all of the different companies and the route that I've taken. But yeah, a strategic move rather than just an accidental move. But it's been squiggly in that way, that it's kind of gone up and down, left and right, and up and down, left and right. And I got there in the end.
And I love the idea that there are different interpretations of that word squiggly as well. And you've taken that, almost that chess player's view of things. I mean, I feel like a lot of stuff happened to me by accident. So, I love the idea of you being a bit more strategic around it. That's fascinating. And Sarah, what about you? How would you sort of sum up your, because you've worked for some great organizations as well?
So I guess on the same theme, I guess mine has probably been more linear, always in and amongst the L&D world. I guess the squiggliness, to use the same word, has come between moving into slightly more OD roles, talent roles, a little stint in HR, but still then very much in and amongst that HR L&D world. And I think that just comes from bit of luck, bit of choice, but the consistent theme has always just been that passion for developing others, watching others grow, the coaching component, and just really how you can get the best out of people. So probably more calculated in that sense, which I guess similar to Jackie, I've been very drawn to some of the big brand names, but always in and amongst that world of talent, and how you can learning's one component of that, and the L&D is obviously a big component of that, but how you can really pull it all together into the employee experience, which for me is ultimately what we're all trying to do, get the best out of our people for our organizations.
Yeah. And I mean, it's one of the reasons why I love the industry so much as well. I mean, you know, you said this, Serena, but I think there's just such a common thread among people wanting to help others. And that makes it a very sort of enjoyable and rewarding place to work. But Prach, if I can pick up on your squiggliness, if we can use that phrase, what would you say, you know, sort of reflecting on your early careers and a part of your career and the fact that it wasn't L&D, what would you say to somebody who was maybe looking at our profession but wasn't maybe sure how to make that transition or make that move? Because yours happened quite organically, but maybe reflecting on some of that, there's some takeaways there.
No, definitely. And I think something Sarah said about, you know, kind of getting the best out of the people is truly powerful. And for me, it was knowing the business really well, which is something that was very credible when I kind of did move into L&D. The fact that you had lived and breathed and you could identify with the challenges that they were having versus, you know, just being sent on a course which sometimes got an NPS of 100, and sometimes if the lunch wasn't good, didn't get it, and you were like, why does that happen? With no real focus on the outcome and performance, which is what, you know, kind of the real value is. So having been in business, the understanding of that really does help. And I think Jackie said it's very transferable. So similarly, at the core skills of being curious and understanding whichever business you're part of, understanding the commercials, I think is very important, because we often find in L&D we are justifying our existence with all kinds of return on, I don't want to use the word investment, but we know what we're talking about. So how do you shift that from actually demonstrating the impact and outcomes a lot more credibly with the knowledge of the business that you often get when you are from that area?
And Serena, I can see you've come off mic. I'm assuming you've got something to add to that.
No, I'm a huge advocate of knowing your context. L&D is nothing without the context it operates in. So what are the skills you bring in as a learning leader? You understand how adults learn. You understand how they absorb information, how they convert that into performance, how that then converts into team and business performance. But right at the end and right at the beginning starts the business. And so this would be what I'd say to anybody, man or woman, anyone starting out in L&D, understand the context in which you operate, because a learning leader in an organization like the NHS, or which has a very, very high emphasis on practical learning, or a bank, which is a high emphasis on regulatory learning, or in a tech company, which is a high emphasis on try it out, make it, break it, nobody's going to die. Understanding the context of that business and how it operates and how it sees value right up front before you do anything in the learning space.
Yeah, so Rosie's actually dropped a question in that says, what's your best piece of advice for women starting out in L&D? But it sounds like regardless of gender, it is that having some context there and understanding, I guess, that bigger picture of what you're trying to achieve. And it's something that, you know, I used to sit outside the managing director's office, and I'm nosy, and I was just always just trying to understand what was going on in the business. So what difference was what I was doing trying to make? So I always just say I was a marketing girl who paid attention, but I think the paying attention is what you're talking about in terms of that context, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's for everybody. I did see Rosie's question. So when we start talking about specific to women, we'll go into that a little bit more. But I think even all of us share that bit, knowing your business. There is no longer the need for just somebody to buy a platform, or somebody to buy a content library, and somebody to throw out training. That's not the needs of the businesses of tomorrow. Learning is changing, and if you want to get into it, you have to have that commercial awareness that before seemed like a nice to have for us because we were so isolated from the business.
Yeah, I mean, we're nearly 15 minutes in and we haven't mentioned AI yet, but the director, I'll take the klaxon. But the pace of change and the pace of that. Well, where does this fit? But actually, I mean, I was in a keynote session on Tuesday, and they were talking about the importance of learning and the importance of kind of creativity and critical thinking and some of these other kind of skills. Like, that's actually more important that, you know, maybe than it's ever been. So actually the function is as important or more important, but just it's evolving in terms of how we do that. But if we come back to the careers piece, I mean, Sarah, have you had sort of, you actually talked about coaching and things like that. Have you had kind of mentors or role models along the way in this space that have kind of helped you get into that leadership position where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I would be here without some of the mentors and inspirational people that have helped pave the way and coach and guide me as well. You know, I think similar to what you've just said, I'm naturally quite a curious person. I am not shy. I'm not shy to ask questions. I like learning from others. I like asking others. But some of the mentors that have guided me along the way, particularly through some of the more notable periods in my personal life, but things like the maternity leaves and coming back after maternity leave, just having others that could help share stories, share advice, help me realize that, you know, just because I've taken the time out doesn't mean that I can't continue to pursue the career that works best for me and for my family as well. So mentors both in formal capacity, informal capacity, and just the power of, you know, again, back to the profession, the power of the network in the profession. I think ask most of us, any of us, a question, and we're all just so happy to help guide and support one another as well. So I think for me, again, if we're thinking about advice for others, it's ask away, never be shy to ask, always be curious, always ask, keep asking, because everybody's journey and path is going to be that little bit different, and which parts of them sound more appealing to you, which parts of them sound more like you. And as I think Jackie said, if it means taking a step back to then go forward, or taking a sideways step, or go after what's going to work best for you and your aspirations as well. But yeah, I mean, I think a huge thanks to all the mentors that I've already had in the past, and look forward to meeting so many more in the future as well that I don't yet know.
I love that. And we have got something to share on mentoring towards the end. And so, Jackie, I know this is a particular passion for you, and I'm quite interested in the sort of not being afraid to, you know, go backwards to go forwards. Is that something you sort of emulated from somebody else, or, you know, in that mentorship type of capacity or role model capacity, or was that just instinct?
No, and as Sarah was talking, then I was thinking, so I've obviously got, well, not obviously, hopefully not obviously, got a few years on Sarah, but so mentoring and coaching wasn't something that was available to me when I started my leadership journey. It just wasn't. You know, it was a service or a solution that was available to the upper echelons of an organization. And what I'm really pleased to see now in recent years is, of course, that's all become more democratized. You know, people at any level of an organization can find a mentor, find a coach, and make use of those things. But I think I was quite isolated, actually. When I look back now in my early years as a learning leader, there weren't as many organizations out there like LPI, for example. There wasn't LinkedIn where you can connect with people. There wasn't any social media where you could kind of connect with like-minded people. So looking back, compared to the way things are now, it was, you know, you really had to rely on your own instinct. You had to rely on your own very local network of people. And I think, I don't know whether it was luck or good management, but I've been fortunate enough to have some amazing managers and leaders that I've learned something from. Agreeing with Sarah there, you know, lots of people, then I've taken a bit from here and a bit from there. And when you see something that you see somebody that you aspire to be that person or be like that person, then emulate that, take that and build that in your own your own ways of working. So sorry, I probably drifted from the question a bit there, really.
I think there's something in there around trusting your gut though as well, right? And I think sometimes when you need to make a move, or it's scary to move jobs, right? But I think most people know in their heart if they want to stay or go. And
well, funny enough,
you have to trust yourself.
Yeah, I reflected on that as well recently, which is to say, was it always necessary for me to move to a new organisation to do that next thing? And I don't know the answer to that. Obviously, we'll never know the answer to that. But I think that I'm probably I've always been ambitious, and I'm probably quite impatient. So I'm always looking for the next thing. Or always have been looking for the next thing. So I'm kind of been seduced at that 4 or 5 year mark by a bigger, meatier challenge. Yeah, I think it's something to do with the personality as well. That if you find yourself losing a bit of enthusiasm or losing a bit of energy, then you either need to do something about that within the organisation. In my case, I've chosen to move on to the next, to the next thing.
And I mean, just on mentoring, what I would say is, I mean, I sort of appoint unofficial mentors all the time. They don't even, half the time, they don't even know. People like Serena have given me like amazing advice. And I never sort of sat down formally and said, Serena, I'm going to make you my mentor. I just went, oh, she's I'm going to ask her questions. So I think there's something in there to your point, Sarah, about don't be afraid to ask and don't feel like it needs to be too official. But moving on from the sort of the individual contributor role to, I'm going to ask you this, Serena, because you, like you said in your words, you've kind of done pretty much all of the roles within that. That transition from sort of doer, design, facilitation, some of the jobs that you've done, to leadership, what were some of the key lessons that you've learned, or maybe some key bits of advice that you could give people who are on that journey?
It's a very good question. I think, like everybody else, you sort of fall into leadership, right? You're not entirely sure when you first get your first team member, whether it's as a project manager, or as a team leader, or as a onboarding buddy. You're not entirely sure when you get into this mode of now you're responsible for someone else. So I don't think it was, when I started off, it was that well thought through. And I'm sure I made plenty of mistakes on the way. Cue in everybody who's listening to this on the LinkedIn chat who I ever reported into me going, yeah, she's right. She was terrible. But I do believe that we are fundamentally, and apologies for this word, I'm a recovering academic, a socially constructed community, a profession. We learn more from each other than we do from anything else. The research and the publishing and the books and all of that are great, but we learn so much from each other's experiences. I also hit upon the ladies here. Jackie's like my go-to for years. I've known Prachi for almost 20 years now. That sounds scary. We went to school together. And but you learn so much from each other. So one of the biggest things that I would say is that be in touch with your community, draw upon the experiences that other people have. When I was looking at a manufacturing company to be a part of, I knew Jackie had experience there I never had. We'll never all be in the same industry. We'll never all have the same context. We'll never have the same proportion of young learners or graduate recruitment schemes or leadership development or regulatory learning or compliance based up. We'll never all be able to know it all ourselves. So the leaning into our network is probably one of the biggest things that I have learned from being in L&D. I would say.
And I'd also say that most people are flattered, right? If you ask somebody, look, I would love to know a bit about you and your career, and I'd love to ask you some questions. Most people in L&D, A, want to help, which we've talked about, but B, it's like, that's massively flattering. You know, you're not going to be, and if you frame it in the context of wanting to learn rather than just sort of leech off somebody's experience, then I think there's always a conversation to be had. So that's really good. I love that, a socially constructive profession. I think that should be our new strapline collectively. I think that's powerful.
I think, Kate, just to add on that as well, I think, notwithstanding the conversation we've just had about understanding the unique business challenges, we all then also understand what we have all got in common. And often we're in small teams and we're dealing with people, and we're dealing with first-time managers or leadership, or, you know, onboarding. We're dealing with the same challenges. So again, it's just that network understands what it's like to work in often a small team. The business possibly see you as a cost rather than an investment. We've got the same iterations of things that we've seen time and time again. But so again, let's use the network and use each other's experiences so that we can learn and grow together. You know, I think very few of us are teams of hundreds and hundreds of people. So why sit in a room on your own trying to come up with the answer on your own? Use each other.
That's exactly right. You know, we're so small. Sometimes we're the only person there, and sometimes there's, you know, you're there as a leader. You've got 2, maybe maximum 4 people under you, and where do you reach out to? Who is your sounding board? Who's the place you go to? The community of what we have in common, and also what we have. It's a Venn diagram of what I need. Everything that you know, everything that I know, and everything that we both need somewhere sits in the middle.
Yeah, I think I in some of the smaller organisations that I've worked, I've been the only L&D. I'm the first L&D person that they've had, and there's a danger then of living in a bit of an echo chamber. You know, you're listening to your stakeholders, you're listening to the people who've been there for many years or whatever, and you're hearing about what they need, and you've got to get outside of the business. You've got to connect with people who are in similar or different positions to you, and use them as a sounding board. Because if you don't, as I say, you'll end up with that echo chamber, and that's not a good place to be.
Yeah, and I think I would echo that. You know, as consultants, you were often sent on projects with no clue what it was about, and then you go and discover, oh my God. And if I had to rewrite the agile, you know, kind of famous term that everyone's heard, fail early, fail fast, I would change it to learn early, learn fast. So, you know, you experiment, you try, and that should be rewarded. And I think that's my constant challenge with the way we reward behaviors and the risk-taking appetite, which we'll probably come to later. So don't be afraid to experiment and learn from it. And sometimes if you don't have someone to bounce off ideas in the same profession, it's always good to get someone from a different profession as well, because they might come up with a completely different perspective, which you're like, oh, okay, I've never thought about that. And I think that has often helped me in some of the tricky situations that I've been on as well.
Yeah, Prachi, I'd love to ask you now. I mean, you know, I love that learn early, learn fast. And when you think about sort of risks that you've taken, be that moves in your career or maybe some initiatives that you've led on in organizations, and where you're maybe trying to push the boundaries, but you also need to manage the status quo. You know, what's that? And like I say, especially if, you know, the pace of change and technology and where we are at the moment, and you know, we have, you know, Cornerstone, we have this conversation all the time, because, you know, we could be doing all sorts of things with, you know, large language models and blah blah blah, but our customers can't take that risk. So, you know, like open models, for example, if you're running a pharmaceutical organization or a finance organization, the compliance factors are massive, right? So we've got a huge responsibility to our customers, and then as a lead in the organization, you've got that responsibility as well to kind of manage the progress versus the stability kind of part. So I'm interested. And the learn or fail early and fast, probably that mindset has an impact on how you manage that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's not often that you'll have a ready-made use case to try some of these things. I know we said let's find the business case and then look for a solution, but sometimes you don't have that, and that's when I kind of tell my team as well is let's divide our time and also our budget accordingly. So there will always be the vanilla that we have to do, right? You've got to have, even though we know half of the people won't ever come to look at that, but some of those basics has to be in place. So I would say let's put some time to make sure that that's happened, but always carve time out for the new, the innovative, spending time with business leaders and talking and understanding their challenges to see and experiment. And often you'll find someone there who's willing to put a bet on it, and then you can co-create, which takes away the pain of, oh, is it just L&D doing something to them? That collaboration really is very helpful, I've found, and that risk-taking ability is then shared, and it's much easier to deal with as well if you don't. And looking at it as, yeah, we're going to learn something from it. We know we don't have a solid use case, or we've got this. I'm a tech optimist, so I'm always willing to try something new. Sometimes, like I said, without having a real business case, which won't be looked on very positively from the L&D profession in large. But yeah.
That's fantastic though, and leads me really nicely onto the kind of the broader question around stakeholder management. And that's huge within an organization, because you are effectively trying to manage, and to your point, Sarah and Serena, you're often a small team or a team of one, trying to balance all of these demands from the business, from kind of routine compliance through to something more innovative or boundary pushing. What strategies do you employ to kind of build and maintain those relationships, and then ensure that they're kind of being used to contribute to something positive, like Prachi said? So Jackie, I'm going to come to you first, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah. So I guess my first point on that is meet them where they are. And I don't just mean physically, which is actually important. I'll come back to that in a minute. And I think it was Serena or Prachi that mentioned the importance of understanding your stakeholders' challenges, individual, their personal challenges, but their challenges that they're facing. Learn their language and use their own language back to them, and just in a broader sense, meet them where they are. So, the importance of keeping stakeholders, especially your sort of C-suite stakeholders, updated in a way that informs them without demanding too much of their time and attention. Just a bit of a nudge theory, sort of just keep reminding them, I'm here, I'm doing this, we said we'd do that, we've done it, and don't expect any response back from them sometimes. Just keep that going, because we're L&D is actually in a really powerful position now, more than I've seen it in my whole career. We've been battling that situation for years, that I'm going to say this, Serena, and I know you'll hate me for it, but the seat at the table, this has been going around and swirling around the industry for as long as I've been in it. And I think in recent years, we're actually there. We're in a position now where organizations have realized that people development is super powerful, and we're the people that can lead on that, and I don't want us to waste it. So keep that information flow going with your stakeholders, and then the other point really that I wanted to make on this is about the importance of that stakeholder sponsorship or buy-in. It's absolutely critical, and I know probably everybody knows this, but I have to say it anyway. It's just critical. If you don't have the buy-in at that senior level, then you're pretty much not going to go anywhere. So if you're starting out on your journey into learning leadership, and you're wondering what practical solutions there are for this, I'd suggest find a mentor or a coach or somebody who you can bounce some ideas off. Ask them, how do I set up and run a steering committee? How do I use some stakeholder mapping tools, or how, what tips can you give me on managing key stakeholder relationships? And then also start thinking about brevity and simplicity, because you don't want to be sending a tsunami of information to these stakeholders. Learning's not their top priority. So keep it brief, keep it simple. Don't tell them stuff. Don't tell them how you got there. Don't tell them all the ins and outs of the numbers. Tell them what they need to hear and what resonates with them.
There's a thing around one of the personality things where you're a colour, and they say about approaching people who are a certain colour: be bright, be brief, be gone.
Yeah.
But I always think that about any leader, to be honest. I don't know or care what colour they are, but I just always think, be personable, give them it in a very short summary, and then get out. Whatever.
I've seen so many times that because we're so passionate about what we do, we'll share every step that we took on the journey to build something or to create an initiative, and we'd share all of the stuff that we've lived and breathed for the last 3 months while we were developing it. And actually they don't care. Think about what they do care about and give them that information, and that's where you'll start to build those really strong relationships and become that trusted advisor, which is obviously a place we need to be.
Yeah. And Sarah, what about you? So same question around stakeholders, really, and that management thereof.
Yeah, so I think just to build on a couple of points that Jackie said, and then possibly think of adding as well. I think, Jackie, where you said learning might not be their problem, but actually, again, it's back to what we've been saying. What is their problem? So is it retention? And then again, how can we talk about what we're doing in terms of retention? Because retention they will care about, or something like that. So I think very similar. It's how can you become that trusted advisor that's speaking their language, still obviously then showing what we're doing as that investment to it, but starting kind of with that business objective in mind. So if it's around growth, let's talk about growth. If it's around retention, let's talk about retention, and then through the work that L&D are contributing to it as well. And I think, just a couple of then other words, it's that credibility piece. So what is it that we're doing? The impact. So how, again, are we demonstrating the impact of the work that our teams are doing? And I think the trust. So you said at the end there, the trusted partner, the trusted advisor, but it is that very much, we're here to do this with you. We're not doing it to you or for you. We are doing this with you. And how can we keep that constant flow of communication, build that trust, and really ultimately be seen as that investment rather than that cost, and trying to solve for the same business challenges that the business are trying to solve for as well. So again, I think thinking about, if we're actually then trying to think about some practical advice, communication is key, but I think that's key across the board for all of us. But constant flow of communication, really focusing on real business challenges and the impact that we're having, and as I said before, the credibility and trust piece are key.
Brilliant. Love that. I've got loads of notes. I've taken like 2 pages of notes already. And we've had a question from Paula, I can see here. So what can we do to support people who are feeling isolated or like they're moving backwards, not to lose hope, and to help them find their path? So I'm going to make a leap and assume that it's talking about people who are on the road to learning leadership, and rather than the people that we're trying to, the workforce that we're trying to support from L&D. But I think that's an interesting question. Maybe people are lost in some of these areas that we've been talking about, maybe finding their place, maybe managing those stakeholders, maybe getting that sponsorship, maybe managing that risk and innovation piece. So Serena, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, so there's 2 angles to look at this, and that we're all coming from, right? So one, we are learning leaders. Great. And all of these tips that we've given are valid for everybody who aspires to be a learning leader. And then there's the women angle. And each of us have cut our teeth in different ways. And I'm sure every single person would have varying reasons where, as a woman, you always felt you were a couple of steps behind. And if you've never felt that in your career, wonderful. But I cut my teeth I keep saying that phrase, I need a new one. I started my career more than 25 years ago in India. And all through time, when you work in HR or in L&D, it seems like the cliche profession that women wind up in. 70% of all people entering L&D are women. And then you go through the chain, and when you get to the top, 70% of learning leaders are men. Something's gone wrong in that entire bit. So there's two ways to approach this. One, what is my journey to learning leadership? And two, what do I have to be mindful of, given that I'm in a profession that just has a lot of women, and we are seen as not commercial and the safe place for women to build a career. So all of these tips now, which include knowing the commercials of the business, make you bulletproof irrespective of your gender. But the second thing is addressing the bits head on. How many of us get what people ask whether, oh, if you hire them, when does their maternity leave kick in? Or when the cliche jokes about the times of the month, and everyone has gone through that, and that contributes to this feeling of isolation and not being part of it. So the narrative that what I'm trying to say, and I don't have a solution. We only have our experiences, right? If you start with knowing how you're communicating to your stakeholders, knowing the commercials of the business, being bulletproof in what you are offering, because I keep saying this, you put out the same bait, you're going to catch the same fish. If your bait is courses and happy sheets and butts on seats and hours on training, you're going to get the same reaction irrespective of your gender, probably worse, or if there's already a cliche in people's mind for you. And then you start, once those elements are bulletproof, then you start looking at, why am I still struggling in this firm? And very, very often, it is all right to step back and go, if this is not the right place for me. And I always found, and this is a personal experience, I've found it harder to identify when it is that I should have my position. This is not my space. This, I need to move out. And I've never got that right. The firm has often seen it far before I have. And I don't know whether it's a gender thing. I don't know whether it's a Serena thing. But I think that if you know that your expertise, your experience, your offering, and you're dealing with your business and commercials and stakeholders is right, then it's all right to say, I'm probably not in the in the right place that recognizes this and recognizes when you move on.
Yeah.
Sorry, you got all warts and all, right? Just...
No, it's great. Archie, were you gonna add to that?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, kind of feeling isolated is really tough. So please do reach out to any of us in the panel, but also, to your friends and family, and don't be afraid to ask. I guess my thing about moving backwards. So when I look at every time I've changed my career, I think I've moved backwards, right? But backwards to what? Is it less salary? Is it the level that I should have been on? So we are, as human beings, I can't remember the word Serena used, but we do compare each other, ourselves with others. And you've got to reduce some of that. It's not easy, but we spend 8 hours a day working. Is there one or two things that you can focus on and then propel you forward? Is there at least one thing that brings you joy, like, why am I getting up in the morning? And if that's a challenge, then I think, like Serena said, take a step back and do something different. But 8 hours is a long, it's a big commitment. We don't have to grow linear upwards, but if we are growing as individuals or in our profession, whether it's, as Jackie was saying, sidestepping or sometimes taking a step back to go 2 steps forwards, that's absolutely okay. And I think some of us in this panel have already demonstrated we've done that. So I wouldn't, just look at someone else and say, okay, that's what took them up there, and I'm not moving at that same pace, and hence I'm not successful.
I love that, and I think there's something really in that. So comparison is the thief of joy. So I use that phrase a lot. I think that's like a Roosevelt quote or something, but I use that phrase a lot. But Sarah, I'd love to ask you, because there's also this notion of what good looks like, to build on what Prachi was saying. And so, you know, you've worked for some, you know, enormous brands, probably with bigger teams than you've got maybe at LPI. But LPI is an amazing opportunity to make an impact on learning as a profession. So, you know, it's not necessarily, you know, going up the food chain in terms of, oh, I've got a huge team or I've got a massive budget or whatever it is, but the work that you can do and the impact with LPI is huge, right? So was that like a reframing in your head, or like just a different lens to be able to apply to the opportunity? That's quite a personal question.
So I think a long time back, and I'll actually have to look up if it's a book, or, but I remember a long time back in my career, someone talking me through something called career anchors, and really understanding what your anchors are. So what is the thing that you need to keep you grounded? And that can change, but is it flexibility? Is it purpose? Is it salary? Is it promotion? Is it a big team? Is it, and again, if someone can see if that is a book, or but for whatever reason, I've always held on to that, and it's okay for your anchor to change over time, and it's okay to acknowledge that and own it. And so if for one snapshot period of time your anchor is all about recognition and growth, go for recognition and growth, and go for a job that's going to give you recognition and growth. If then a different snapshot, and again, they're all snapshots, so nothing has to then be, this is my anchor and I've got to own that anchor for the next 10 or 20 years. My snapshot could then be very dependent on the time in my life, or situational, or what else is going on around me. So so I think for me, I've always then really held on to that concept of an anchor and what's working for, I've relocated overseas, but I relocated with my husband, and at the time I then wasn't in a position to work. I had to wait for my green card to be processed. That wasn't a choice that I would have actively made, but as soon as I then got that, I could then reassess what my current anchor would be and what I was looking for. So I guess a long answer to the question, but my current anchor and what the LPI can now give in a different sense to some of the companies that I've worked at before is that purpose, is that giving back to the community, is that thinking about, a lot of what we've been talking about today, the power of the network, the power of the community, the power of supporting one another. And at the moment, I'm in such a unique and privileged position to be in an organization that is purpose-led, and and in this space as well, really focusing on making learning work, meaningful learning experiences, and getting the best out of the performance of the organizations that we're there to support.
Yeah, love that. And then, so, oh, go on, Serena.
Oh, sorry. Just from Sarah's, there were two words which I remembered. I think there are times in your career when you climb, and those are the climbing phases of your life, and there are those when you plateau, and it's just important to not see the plateau as a drop. So as I am plateauing and I'm not climbing, what am I focusing on? And it could be development, and it could be personal life, and it could be retreating, and that's the other word that came up, because someone once told me to define retreat, and I went, oh my God, that's horrible, right? If you're retreating in a battle, you're gone. And they said no, because the definition of retreat is to go back.
Regroup.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe Jackie told me. You see, regroup and then come back again with a renewed attack in yourself. And I love those words, the retreat and the plateau, because then you're not constantly looking at the climb, and you're not constantly looking at the race, and you're not looking at everybody else's context and relationship to yours. You're just looking at how, for myself, I am at peace with where I am on this plateau, because I'm doing X, Y, and Z, or how I know I might be stepping back in order to regroup and go forward.
And it's also about absorbing. Is it absorbing, digesting? I don't know what the correct word is really, but if you're on this really accelerated path to leadership, you don't really get that depth of knowledge in some areas, especially if you're moving from organisation to organisation, because most of your learning energies about what's the commercial context I'm in, what industry I'm in, how do people work here, how do they talk. So there are absolutely, Serena, times where you need to just pause, take a breath, and absorb what's going on around you, and that gives you a really rich experience then, rather than that we talked many years ago about whether 20 years experience in one person is equal to 20 years in another, and it's absolutely not. It's quantity versus quality. So you need those years of plateau or retreat or regrouping to make sure that you've got that depth of experience as well as the breadth of experience.
And I think then from a female point of view, so and hopefully, Paula, that's helped. There are times when I had 2 small children, I didn't want to climb at that point. I wanted to do good work and I wanted to enjoy what I do, but I was trying to survive. My like sleepless nights and all the rest of it. Not everyone has kids, and people might have different priorities, but there are times when it's okay to prioritize other things, right? And people do things like they'll say in a year, I'm going to do an Ironman or woman competition, whatever it might be. Your career is maybe not the most important thing to climb at the same time as trying to tackle another challenge. So I like that concept a lot.
I think there were.
And I think I just wanted.
Sorry, Kate, go on.
No, you go.
Oh, I was just looking at Paula's question there, and I think there were 2 questions in there. There's about people who are moving backwards, not to lose hope. But then there's a slightly different element, which is how can we help them find their path? And I think there's 2 slightly different things. So, one of the things that we do really well, and probably what took us into this profession, is helping people to find their path. What can you learn? How can you build your knowledge and experience and behaviours? And I don't know how the others feel, but I think helping somebody to find their path, find their true calling or their passion, or a role that they're really good at, that they really get satisfaction from, is one of the reasons why I went into this. So there's one question about losing hope, why am I not moving forward, and then there's the other one, which is what am I on the right path? And I think that's where a mentor or a coach will come in and play a huge part.
Great. Well, and I think that's really important to hold on to. We have got another question, which is around what quality do you think is most important for women to have in order to succeed today?
I'm going to say be bold.
I'm going to say find your voice.
There's a line in a book that I can't remember what book it is, but it says she looked the world in the eye with her chin up, and I always think about that. I'm whatever challenge it is, whatever conversation it is, I'm going to look it in the eye, and I'm never going to apologize for that.
Good one, like that, Kate.
For me, it took the longest. Finding my voice was a big thing. The knowing who I was and what I stood for, finding my voice is what I say. And then when you sit back and you take that time out to not react, but to reflect and come up with that reflective answer, you'd go, you know what? Yeah, I am right. I do know my stuff. I am all that. A pint of lager and 2 packets of crisps. I really, I am, and that's okay. And I know that we're doing stuff on imposter syndrome and all of that later, but that's the when we're talking about what quality does a woman need to succeed, I think that's the one quality that constantly holds us all back, the second guessing of ourselves. So I say finding your voice would be my most.
That. And then we've got another one which is around also feeling stuck, but and the question ends with sort of not getting the guidance, not feeling like they're learning and growing, how to step out from such a situation. And I actually had a question around sort of advice around resources as well, or where where you guys might go for support. So I don't know if we can sort of, I think there's probably a then in there somewhere. Obviously, Learning Performance Institute, like that's a great wealth of resources there. We have to say that, obviously, being on this call, but like I genuinely think we can all say that we've had huge value out of the network and the resources over the year. But Prachi, what are some of your go-tos, and maybe how that overlap with stepping out from a situation like that?
I mean, there are so many, but I have to say, off late, the window to all the resources has definitely become LinkedIn, and we are doing a LinkedIn Live session. But following, people that you admire or you've heard of, and then engaging in conversations with them, either on their chats or in privately, definitely helps. And then I also look at, Gartner and CRF are the other two that I really look at for frameworks and models that you can then apply to what you're doing. So many. I mean, the thought leaders are truly inspirational. I think a lot of technology companies and consulting firms also come out with research, and not everything is great, and there's always two sides. Skills is great, skills is not. Should we move to a skills-based organization is the latest debate that I'm following. So you've got to listen to both sides.
Yes, I had the AI, got the skills one.
Yeah, and then you come to your own conclusion, or you try an experiment and see, okay, that worked for me or that didn't. So that people I've found are so helpful with LinkedIn. Like Jackie, you were saying early on, we didn't have that. Just reach out, and people are so willing to connect and have a debate or discussion and conversation, share thoughts. So I think that's definitely my go-to.
And take those opportunities, right? I mean, obviously, I work on the vendor side. We're running an event next week that's free to attend. Take those opportunities. A lot of the LPI events are free, or you can join them, and just taking those opportunities or engineering some of those opportunities is something where you can start to then have those conversations and be able to step out of those situations.
Completely agree. Bring those two things together. Go to events, and when you're at the events, connect with the people who you were interested in, or were talking about something that may interest you. And I think we mentioned it kind of way back in the beginning of the webinar about this echo chamber. That if you are in an organization or in a place where you don't feel like you're growing or learning anymore, then that's definitely a red flag. You need to not necessarily leave the organization, but you need to sort of connect with the outside world, with the community. And I think events are great for doing that. And then the follow-up is absolutely through the socials, and follow people who interest you, and you'll learn. And I think another point actually is read the comments. Prachi, you just mentioned there that don't take everything that you read as gospel, and the way to cipher through that, I always find, is to go through the comments, and there'll be people who are challenging the author, and there are people who challenge the challenger, and that gives you a really great place, as Serena mentioned, to find your own voice and say, well, what's my opinion? It really makes you stop and get many sides, and then you can decide where you stand on that subject.
Well, it's a great segue with like 2 minutes left. It's a great segue into some of the resources that we're trying to put together in partnership with the LPI. Super grateful to be collaborating on all of this. So hopefully that will help some of you guys who are maybe feeling a little bit stuck. But we're looking at a webinar in July, so date to be confirmed, but stay tuned to the LPI channels for news on that. We're looking at a September date for dealing with imposter syndrome, so that will be a good one, and an October date for knowing our rights, so quite practical. And then we're looking at some in-person meetups as well in September in London, and hopefully in Barcelona, which is very exciting. And then also Jackie is actually leading on our mentoring program, so we are actively looking for mentors and mentees. It's something that I do internally at Cornerstone. I absolutely love it. I also do it unofficially quite a lot of the time as well. So that's my payback for getting other people to do that for me. But do drop us a line, any one of us a line, if you're interested in taking part in that. And finally, we are looking to make this a charitable effort as well in terms of trying to pay it forward. So our chosen charity is the UN Foundation for Helping Women. So it's UNFPA. And we will share the link with you for that as well. So if you have any money or just a few quid to donate to that, we will be looking to do more on that as time goes on as well, and the Women in Learning Leadership initiative evolves. So that leaves me 20 seconds to thank Jackie, Sarah, Prachi and Serena so much. I hope you found it as valuable as I have. I've got like 5 pages of notes here. But fantastic insights, and we will see you very soon for the next one. Thank you all very much, ladies.
Thanks everyone, and thanks
Thank
Kate.
you. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you all.
See you all soon. Bye bye.